Everybody, it's Mackie, and we're back with another episode of the Hidden Threads podcast. And we're still here with Samantha McNamara. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. You like being called Sam or Samantha?
Either or.
What does your mama call you?
Samantha.
Samantha?
Yeah.
I met your mother a while ago.
Yeah.
First grade, retired first grade teacher.
Yes.
All right. So we got a teacher and then a psychology expert. I'm in trouble. So I don't know if I'm going to make it through the day.
Don't say but or shut up around her.
Yeah, okay.
First grade teacher.
Get smacked on the hand.
Yeah.
So she probably taught back in the day when you could paddle children.
Yeah, no, she did.
I used to get paddled a lot. I'll just say that back in my day. Did you?
Believe it.
You're a little younger than me. So.
I had my apple moved down from the tree into the basket one time. Though.
Ooh.
It stuck with me.
Ooh, that stuck with you? Were you like a perfect child?
Well, I turned the lights off in the bathroom. But to be fair, I think she deserved it.
Okay.
We'll unpack that later.
Yeah, okay. Good. All right. So this episode, we're going to talk about Norfolk County, Massachusetts. Okay. Mm-hmm. We're going to start out talking about the Sandra Birchmore case. All right. I'm going to read a little bit about it. So Sandra Birchmore is a young woman who was found dead in her Canton, Massachusetts apartment in 2021 at the age of 23. Her death was initially ruled a suicide, but later federal authorities determined it was a homicide. We just don't rule it a suicide right out the gate, right? Key details about Birchmore's case include her death in February 2021. All right. Her family disputed the ruling, believing she was murdered, and was filing a lawsuit against several former Staunton police officers alleging years of abuse. So from what I heard and from what people's talked about online that have messaged me that from up that way, is that this girl was in a program as a teenager where you can go hang out with the cops and see if you want to be a cop one day, right? Called an Explorer program, I believe. Mm-hmm. She was in that program with a girl named Kelly Dever, who was testified in the Karen Reed trial, which we're going to get into in just a minute. So it's crazy how this is all interconnected.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Right. And so this girl, they believe, was groomed by a police officer. Can you tell us what grooming is? You know more about it. You're very...
Grooming would be whenever you have an older person who takes a younger person and takes them under their wing, kind of, makes them feel safe. And mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of a way to explain grooming without the use grooming, but molds them into someone that they could take advantage of.
With the eventual goal of sexual interactions, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the eventual goal. And this guy, apparently, when she was very young when he started this, and it wasn't just him, the cop. Let me see what they have his name mentioned here. They do not have his name. Yeah, Matthew Farwell was he's the one that's indicted for the murder. Farwell, I'm sorry. He was the one indicted for the murder. But what I'm hearing, there were several police officers involved in this. It wasn't just one. She was, for lack of a better phrase, she was passed around kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. And she was pregnant when she was dead. Now, the allegation is that Farwell, I keep saying it wrong, Farwell thought that it was his baby. He's married with children and things. So the allegation is he murdered her or made it look like a suicide so that would go away. Right. Mm-hmm. Now later on they did a test and it turned out it was not his baby. I wonder whose it is. Did you hear that part?
I did not.
Okay. It turned out he was not the father. Now it was done by the district attorney's office.
So how reliable is that?
This district attorney's office has some serious problems if you've been following on this area, Norfolk County. Mm-hmm. But now we talked about grooming a little bit. Do you see that in your career in psychology?
All the time.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I don't think that it's something that people who groom necessarily are. It's not like they're sitting around saying, I'm going to groom this child today, mm-hmm. And that's what makes it sticky, that I don't know that it's something that people who are sick know that they're doing.
Right.
And I'm not saying that to excuse their behavior. But for vulnerable children, I think that's something that really has to be understood with this case. With Sandra's case, is that she was vulnerable. Wasn't it her mother had passed away? Her father wasn't involved in her life. Right. She didn't really have a support system.
I think she was passed around from family member to family member, something like that. So
there was nobody consistent to really look out for her. And that puts her in a position to be preyed upon by people.
Predators.
Yeah,
right?
by predators. Yeah.
And Farwell said, well, I'm going to take that father figure role and
yes,
eventually turn into a sexual relationship. So
exactly.
right. Now the same area. So what happened here was the parents kept saying, hey, the cops are dirty. The cops are dirty. So the FBI got involved and they said, hey, this was a homicide. Mm-hmm. And they got into this thing and they realized that the detectives on this one were the same detectives that were involved in the Karen Reed case. So that's what they went over and took a look in that case as well. Mm-hmm. That's what got them involved in the Karen Reed trial as well. Do you know much about the Karen Reed case?
I know a little bit more about Sandra's, but I know a little bit about the Karen Reed.
Well, Karen Reed just got...
Mm-hmm. Yes, I watched that. I did watch the verdict.
You see him cheering outside?
Yes,
that's pretty
I
fun.
did.
Pretty good. But yeah, I think she was getting railroaded because I think this cop got killed by somebody and they tried to pin it on somebody else.
Exactly.
You talk about dirty police department.
Yeah. I think it was difficult to like Karen Reed.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was very stoic. She was very
mm-hmm.
Stone-faced. She could come off as aloof. And I think that maybe she wasn't the best witness
right.
For that. But the evidence just spoke for itself in that case.
Right. Yeah, it did. And the people trying to manipulate evidence. So the Kelly Dever, the cop that testified, the female police officer, she was in charge of dispatch, like when they brought the car back to the police department to look at it. Mm-hmm. And she went and told the FBI, said, hey, these two cops were in there for a long time. And then the commissioner called her in and said, hey, go do the right thing. And she went back and said, oh, no, they weren't in there for a long time. So she changed her testimony. A lot of testimony changing. Mm-hmm. And it's just their car crash expert turned out to be, his tests were a joke. The state's car crash expert, he manipulated the test to make it look like, to get to a conclusion. Well, if you're doing a test, you're supposed to go in with unbiased and just test it and see what happens. Right. And he already had a conclusion and it was a bad deal. Let me get back to my notes here.
I think that's something we touched on earlier too, is that we can have a bias. You know, you're lying if you say that you don't have a bias. Everybody has a bias going in, but you have to be aware of that bias whenever you're investigating something.
Right.
And be willing to put it aside and go where the data takes you.
Right. So what I'll do too is, when we're writing reports and stuff, is I'll say, hey, I was paid this much money by the client.
Right.
That's a bias, right? Mm-hmm. We just tell them, hey, yeah, we were hired by the client. We didn't just come into this thing blindly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have a side that we're working for. It's silly not to say that now, but if you're working for the state though, you're supposed to be unbiased and fair to everybody.
Right.
Right. You're not a private entity and you're supposed to abide by the Constitution. Right. So, but yeah, so Norfolk County, Massachusetts, they have another incident too, where it was actually next door in Suffolk County, where a state trooper candidate died in training recently. So that was about 6-7 months ago. So they got all kind of problems.
Oh, I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah, there hasn't been an investigation into it. Now there's an independent investigation going on. So
I'll follow that.
It's just a problem. I think the kid's name was Delgado, was the trainee, but it's just a corrupt organization. And you think that happens in Alabama?
Without a doubt.
Right. Did you hear about Huntsville? That's over near you.
Yes. Okay. I did hear about it. I don't know a lot about it, but I did hear about it.
So Huntsville's a small town. I think they had 5 cops. It's kind of south of Decatur, north of Birmingham on the interstate there. And they came up and they just fired everybody. They fired the police chief on down and got rid of everybody.
Were some of them related?
I think so.
Yeah.
And it was a big problem because they were pinning evidence on people that wasn't there and all these things, and a big string of corruption going on.
Yeah. And
they just fired all of them. So we may see that in Norfolk County, Massachusetts. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it happens here. I had a run-in with a police officer while I was on a job, which is, we have that sometimes, especially for surveillance. Sometimes you can call local police departments before and say, hey, I'm going to be here running surveillance, so you can give them a heads up.
Right.
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And I had a police officer, not believe anything I was saying, and put his hand on a gun. I mean, this guy
Really?
looked out of his mind.
You look threatening, Samantha.
Yeah, right. Well, he looked completely out of his mind, and he was like, "Your story's not matching up." And I was like, I was so nervous, and he's like, "Why are you? You're nervous?" And I was like, "Well, you're interrogating me. And I'm just
You
trying
get your
to do
hand on
my
a
job."
pistol. So.
Yeah, you have your hand on a gun. So there was just something off. So I went back, being an investigator, ran a background report on him. Pulled his, all of his criminal, his civil records, and it came back. I mean, I'm talking about a criminal record a mile long.
Really?
Just domestic violence after domestic violence after domestic violence, like multiple.
How's he a cop?
Children involved. Well, he pled guilty
Mm-hmm.
to these charges. And whenever you plead guilty, apparently, so you're admitting that you did it, but you can get like deferred prosecution. So you're not technically convicted.
Mm-hmm.
And in Alabama, you have to be convicted of a crime to.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
For it to go on your record, kind of.
Yeah,
deal.
for it to go on your record to be, for them to not hire you,
mm-hmm.
to not get your APOS certification. So APOS gave him his certification because although he admitted to these violent crimes, some including children,
mm-hmm.
that he was eligible. And so I did a Freedom of Information request because part of the APOS, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's a good moral character standard,
mm-hmm.
to ask him to define that. That's been 6 months ago, and they've yet to define what good moral character is. So there's loopholes. And then in Alabama, I see a lot of department jumping.
Mm-hmm.
They just recently, in the past few years in Alabama, enacted a database where if you have a disciplinary record, it follows you with police officers. But the loophole behind that is if you get in trouble, before they investigate it, they can say, "Hey, you just need to resign."
Mm-hmm.
You can resign quietly, go to another department, and it goes undetected. So that's why I tell people, if you do have issues with people in law enforcement, make sure that your reports and your complaints are emailed and they are on record. It's not something that they can say, "Oh, well, she never called. He never called. That never happened."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. We got a case. I think it's over now, but in Winston County, you know what that is?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I forget it exists.
But the free state of Winston.
Yeah, the free state of Winston.
Where we had a guy, he got arrested. They went into his house, took his phone, and then magically child pornography showed up on his phone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said in a previous episode, immediately I'm like, he's a scumbag. But no, I was working for the guy, and we tried many times. I'm a certified digital forensic examiner. So to get that phone at the lab in Tuscaloosa and do our own extraction on it, the police officer, the detective, he blocked it at every chance he got. So, and he did show me the phone and showed me where it's an iPhone, showed me the original data on the phone. It hadn't been touched. You couldn't see any child pornography in the photos, deleted files, or anything. But his software magically pulled these child pornography photos off of that phone. But they wouldn't let us do an extraction on it. He blocked it. The judge told him to do it again. I met him down there again in Tuscaloosa at the lab, and he came up with a reason not to let us do it again. I think that guy was not a certified digital forensic examiner, so he did his own extraction on the phone. The investigator did, instead of sending it to the lab the proper way and letting the computer geeks do it. So,
but think about the people who don't have those kind of resources. They can't hire private investigators
or a good lawyer. Yeah, he had a good lawyer too.
Yeah,
so, right. Yeah, you just take it and go to prison.
Yeah. How often does this happen?
I know. It makes you think. God forbid I ever get in trouble. But what if something gets pinned on me because I make somebody mad? Right.
Yeah. But this is exactly what we were talking about earlier when people call and they say, "You're never going to believe this." Yes, we will.
Yeah, we will.
Believe you.
We hear it all the time. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Samantha, before we move on?
I think that's all.
All right. We're going to take a break and we'll be back with another episode soon. Say bye, Samantha.
Bye.